Hello, I'm Justin Legan, viticulturist with Pina Vineyard Management.
And I'm Sarah Ferguson, viticulturist with Silverado Farming.
And we're here this morning to discuss the 2021 Growing Conditions Report from the Napa Valley Grapegrowers. So every season has unique features that distinguishes the wines that are made from those vintages. And what are some of the key features that you remember from the 2021 season?
Key features, I would say, would be the early drought conditions. Also the early harvest, early ripening, and then the really great tannin quality that we saw. And what would be the key features you think of?
The thing that comes to mind most for me is just how uneventful the season was in a positive way. It was really a nice, smooth ripening season, and aside from the challenges from not having adequate water, most of the season was relatively uneventful. Frost season in 2021 was more challenging than the previous year. We definitely had more hours. The average for the valley was 114 frost hours, which was significantly more than the previous season. So how did the growing degree days for the 2021 season compare with the previous years?
Definitely lower in growing degree days than 2020. 2020 was just a banner, really warm year. So 2021 was definitely not as warm. And we noticed that it was a different year depending on where you were in the valley. So the warmer sites were lagging behind 2020, but still above some of the other warmer years. But some of the cooler areas were below 2019, more similar to 2018. So it was definitely a different year where you were in the valley.
So the start of the season was a challenge for a lot of growers because the reservoirs weren't full, like you mentioned.
That's right, yep.
And we did get a little bit of rain, but February was mostly cold and dry, and that led to a little bit later of a bud break, probably about 1 week later than average.
We started irrigating because of the dry conditions. Where we had water, we made sure that we started irrigating early, which was not normal. Or 2020 we saw a little bit of that, but not a normal season for that. So Justin, what did you think about the period of bloom and fruit set this year?
So the early part of bloom for most of the cultivars I was a little nervous because there was a cold period there in the early part of May, especially with some of the white varieties and Chardonnay and Sauvignon Blanc specifically. The early part of May was cooler, and we need adequate temperatures for good fruit set. Fortunately, by the end of May, it warmed up quite a bit, and we had ideal conditions for bloom, and fruit set seemed really fast. I mean, how about you?
Yes, we saw most of the Cabernet in that period of warm temperatures, and it was very condensed between start of bloom to fruit set. Exactly.
I think we did see a little bit of shatter in some of the white varieties because of that early cool weather, but for the most part, fruit set was ideal from my perspective.
And it was a little earlier than the previous years, bloom at least. We saw like about a week earlier that period, which was interesting because veraison was at the same time, so it extended that period between bloom and veraison for a lot of the places that we saw.
And the summer weather was really mild. I think compared to the last few years. There wasn't much mildew pressure. Our spray intervals, we were able to extend them a little bit, which is always great. Give us time to get that canopy work done. Although because the canopies were a little bit smaller, we didn't quite have as much work, I think, when it comes to lateral removal and leaf removal, which was good because it's always difficult when you're looking for labor and trying to keep up with what needs to be done.
But the tannin development was definitely more intense in 2021. Color in maturity samples, when we took berry samples,
the extraction. Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
So looking at the conditions that would lead to that, I mean, the milder ripening period was definitely encouraging of those development anthocyanins.
Very few days over 100 degrees, right? Yeah, and when you get above that 95-degree temperature, those vines sort of shut down and stop working. We didn't have as much of that.
That's right. And the warm temperatures in May, before, at bloom and after, also helped to build up the tannins as well. Do you want to talk about harvest?
Yeah, harvest from 2021 was very early. for most of our sites, especially in some of the outside areas of Napa like Pope Valley. We harvested 2 to 3 weeks earlier than normal.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and a lot of that was due to yields being lighter, unfortunately, but it was much earlier than normal.
We saw that too, starting harvest earlier and then actually ending harvest earlier. So and everything was, and the lighter yields was a theme that we saw too, unfortunately. But high quality, just wish there was more.
Definitely, definitely. And right at the end of harvest was that torrential downpour.
I don't actually know, I don't remember if that rainfall, it seemed to come as a surprise. Like
Yes,
we saw
yeah.
rain in the forecast, but I don't think anyone was thinking it was going to be so intense that it was.
Absolutely, yeah. I remember the phone calls with the winemakers and scheduling harvest and thinking, oh yeah, there's a little bit of rain forecasted, but nothing too much to worry about.
Right.
And then it hit earlier and a lot.
Exactly.
A lot. We had rain gauges that recorded over 10 inches of rain in 48 hours. It was incredible. Fortunately, we had finished up picking all the grapes we needed to have picked.
And for us, that really impacted our winterization. So
Oh, right.
compost and getting straw out, making sure that everything is set up for that rain event.
Yeah, it sort of ended the season for a lot of heavy equipment
It
and
did.
operations.
Yes.
So after that late October rains, how are you feeling going into the 2022 season?
Felt really that it set us up really well with full reservoirs and having enough water to get through this year. Just setting up with full reservoirs felt really good.
Yeah, I agree. I think it set us up really nicely for the 2022 season.